Imagine this. You're standing in the stone corridor that leads up to the great arena, where you can hear the roar of 50,000 bloodthirsty Romans echoing like thunder. You can smell the mixture of sweat, blood, and death that permeates the air. Your heart pounds against your chest as you grip your gladius, your sword, knowing that in mere minutes you'll either emerge victorious to the deafening cheers of the crowd, or you'll become another corpse dragged through the sand. Welcome to the Colosseum, where entertainment meant life or death. And you, my friend, were the bloody entertainment. Welcome to the life of a Roman gladiator, where every sunrise might be your last, and every meal could be your final supper. Welcome back to Ancient Rome Revisited. I'm your host, Marcus Aurelius, and yes, I gave the thumbs up and thumbs down to many gladiators during my time as emperor. Today, I'm going to show you exactly what a typical day looked like for these legendary warriors, from the moment they woke up in their cells to the final sword clash on the arena floor. We'll explore where the gladiators lived, what they ate to fuel their bodies for combat, how they trained to become killing machines, and the various tactics that kept them alive in the arena. You'll discover what it was really like when the gates opened and they faced their opponents, whether human or beast. And finally, I'll introduce you to the legendary gladiators whose names still echo through history 2,000 years later. So grab your shield and strap on your helmet, because life is about to get real gory for the next 20 minutes. The Ludus, where gladiators lived. Let me paint you a picture of gladiator housing that would make even the worst college dorm look like a luxury resort. Gladiators lived in barracks or cells within the school complex, essentially glorified prison cells that served as their homes. The most famous of these gladiatorial schools was the Ludus Magnus in Rome. The Ludus Magnus was constructed under the reign of Emperor Domitian during the late 1st century CE. He also erected 3 other ludi around the same time, making it part of a network of training facilities that churned out fighters for the empire's entertainment. Imagine a medieval monastery, but instead of monks studying scripture, you have muscled warriors practicing the art of killing. The gladiator barracks were Spartanly furnished. Think of a modern-day maximum security prison, but with more swords lying around. Each gladiator had a small cell, barely large enough for a bed and personal belongings. Privacy. That was a luxury reserved for Roman citizens, not for those who bled for their entertainment. The irony wasn't lost on the Romans either. These men who could command the roar of thousands in the arena returned each night to cramped quarters, locked behind bars like common criminals. In the main, gladiators were slaves purchased for their strength by local businessmen, treated as valuable property that needed to be housed securely. The gladiator diet, fueling for combat. Now here's where things get interesting, and I guarantee this will surprise you. If you thought gladiators were scarfing down massive steaks like modern bodybuilders, you'd be dead wrong. Their daily, high-energy, vegetarian diet consisted of barley, boiled beans, oatmeal, ash, and dried fruit. Gladiators were sometimes called hordeari, eaters of barley. That's right. These ultimate warriors were essentially ancient vegans. Most people in the Roman Empire had a vegetarian diet, and it turns out that the gladiators were no different. They relied on wheat and barley and plant proteins like beans to get their protein fix. But before you laugh at their carb-heavy diet, consider this. It actually made perfect sense. Barley and beans provided slow-burning energy that could sustain them through hours of brutal training. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of a modern athlete loading up on pasta before a marathon, except their marathon involved potentially getting stabbed by a trident. The Romans had such disdain for barley that they used it as punishment for legionaries, replacing their usual wheat rations with it. Yet this inferior grain was fueling the most elite fighters in the empire. It's like finding out that Navy SEALs train exclusively on quinoa and kale smoothies. And here's a fun fact that would make modern nutritionists weep. They added ash to their food. Not for flavor. Ash was believed to help strengthen bones. So essentially, these warriors were downing what amounted to ancient calcium supplements with every meal. Training regime? Forging warriors. If you think your gym routine is tough, wait until you hear about gladiatorial training. These weren't weekend warriors doing CrossFit classes. This was a full-time job where weakness and failure meant certain death. Training began before dawn and continued well into the evening. The gladiators practiced with wooden swords and shields that were deliberately heavier than their actual combat gear. It's the same principle as baseball players swinging weighted bats. When you finally get the real thing, it feels light as a feather. The training was overseen by skilled instructors called magistri, many of whom were former gladiators themselves. These weren't gentle coaches giving participation trophies. They were hardened veterans who knew that their students' lives depended on mastering every technique. Training included endless drills on footwork, shield work, and weapon handling. They practiced against wooden posts called palos, beating them with wooden weapons until their hands were raw and their muscles screamed. Imagine spending 8 hours a day attacking a telephone pole with a baseball bat, and you'll start to understand their training regimen. But it wasn't just about swinging swords. Gladiators also practiced specific combat scenarios. They learned how to fight in different terrains, how to work with and against various opponent types, and most importantly, how to put on a show. Remember, this wasn't just about winning. It was about entertaining the crowd. Tactics and maneuvers. Gladiator survival skills. The tactics gladiators employed were as varied as the types of fighters themselves. Each gladiator class had specific techniques designed to maximize their strengths and exploit their opponent's weaknesses. Take the Retiarius, the net fighter. His entire strategy revolved around mobility and range. He would dance around his heavily armored opponent, using his net to entangle and his trident to keep distance. If he could get his net around an opponent, the fight was essentially over. But if he missed his throw, he was basically a naked man facing a fully armored warrior, and likewise his death. The Mamillo, on the other hand, were some of the strongest gladiators, and they was usually built like brick shit houses. Their strategy was simple: get close, stay protected behind their massive shield, and deliver devastating sword strikes. They fought like ancient bulldozers, slow but unstoppable. Gladiators also learned psychological warfare. They knew how to read crowds, how to play to the audience, and how to make their victories look more spectacular than they actually were. A skilled gladiator could make a simple disarming move look like a death-defying feat, turning the crowd's roar into a weapon that could intimidate opponents. Showtime. Fighting inside the great arena. When the arena doors opened, everything changed. The months of training, the carefully planned diet, the tactical preparation, it all came down to this moment. As the two gladiators circle each other, each knows that his objective is to maim or trap his opponent rather than to kill him quickly. What's more, the fight must last long enough to please the crowd. This is crucial to understand. Gladiatorial combat wasn't about quick kills. It was about entertainment. A fight that ended in 30 seconds was bad for business. The crowd wanted drama. They wanted to see skill, They wanted to witness a story unfold in the sand. Gladiators fought in various formats. Sometimes it was one-on-one combat, the classic duel that Hollywood loves to portray. Other times they fought in teams, recreating famous historical battles. Imagine an ancient version of Civil War reenactment, except with real weapons and actual death. The arena itself was a stage designed for maximum spectacle. The sand wasn't just for footing, it was there to absorb blood. The underground passages allowed for dramatic entrances and the sudden appearance of wild animals. Everything was choreographed to create the ultimate entertainment experience. Gladiatorial opponents, men and wild beasts. Gladiators faced a variety of opponents. Sometimes they fought other gladiators of the same type, like two myrmillones clashing in a battle of heavy infantry. Other times, they faced different gladiator classes in matchups designed to showcase contrasting fighting styles. But human opponents weren't the only challenge. Gladiators also faced wild animals, lions, tigers, bears, and even exotic creatures like elephants. These animal fights, called venations, were often separate events. But sometimes gladiators found themselves facing down a charging beast with nothing but their wits and weapons. The variety of gladiator types was staggering. The Esidarius, from the Latin word for a Celtic war chariot, Esidum, was likely first brought to Rome from Britain by Julius Caesar. These chariot fighters added a mobile element to the arena, racing around while trying to strike their opponents. Each type of gladiator had their own fan base. Romans would cheer for their favorites like modern sports fans rooting for their team. Graffiti found in Pompeii shows evidence of gladiator fan clubs, with inscriptions praising individual fighters and their accomplishments. Famous gladiators, ancient celebrities. Now let me introduce you to the superstars of the arena, the gladiators whose names have survived 2,000 years and still capture our imagination today. First up, Spartacus. A Thracian soldier by birth, Spartacus was captured by the Romans and then sold as a slave. His owner owned a gladiator school in Capua, and he saw the opportunity to cash in on Spartacus's skills as a gladiator. But Spartacus had other plans. By far the most famous gladiator in history, Spartacus was a Thracian soldier who had been captured and sold into slavery. He led the most famous slave rebellion in Roman history, turning gladiatorial training into military tactics and nearly bringing Rome to its knees. Then there's Flamma, perhaps the most dedicated gladiator who ever lived. The Syrian-born gladiator who rose to fame under the reign of Emperor Hadrian, 117 to 138 AD, is best known for the length of his career and for being awarded his freedom 4 times and repeatedly turning it down. Can you imagine that? 4 times he could have walked away, 4 times he could have lived as a free man, and 4 times he chose to return to the arena. Apparently, he won 21 of these contests, drew 9, and lost only 4, a record that placed him among the very top gladiators. Prycus and Verus deserve a mention too. Perhaps the most famous gladiators immortalized by Martial were Prycus and Verus, whose contest was the highlight of the Colosseum's opening games in 80 AD. Their fight was so legendary that it helped establish the Colosseum as the premier venue for gladiatorial combat. And let's not forget Attilios, who proves that sometimes the underdog really can win. Attilios was a free-born Roman, who most likely volunteered himself for gladiatorial combat as a way of freeing himself from debt. As a rookie, he defeated the gladiator veteran and champion of Emperor Nero, Hilaros, a respected fighter who had 13 wreaths to his name. It would be like an amateur fighter walking into the ring and defeating a multiple-time world champion. the gladiatorial legacy. So there you have it, a complete day in the life of a Roman gladiator. From their sparse barracks to their vegetarian diet, from their brutal training to their moments of glory in the arena. These warriors lived lives that were simultaneously brutal and extraordinary. They were slaves who became celebrities, prisoners who became heroes, and men who found honor in a profession that society officially despised. Successful gladiators were treated almost as our pop idols, commanding huge crowds and earning fame that has lasted millennia. The next time you complain about your morning commute or your office job, remember the gladiators who woke up each day, not knowing if they'd see another sunset. They faced death with courage, fought with honor, and gave us stories that still inspire us today. Their legacy reminds us that even in the darkest circumstances, humans can find ways to demonstrate courage, skill, and honor. And sometimes, just sometimes, they can even choose to stay in the arena when freedom is offered, because some things are more important than safety. The gladiators are gone, but their spirit lives on, in every athlete who pushes beyond their limits, in every person who faces overwhelming odds, and in every human being who chooses to fight rather than surrender. That's the true lesson of the gladiators. Not that violence is glorious, but that courage in the face of impossible odds is the most human thing of all. If you enjoyed this video and have yet to subscribe, then please do so now, and you'll never miss another episode of Ancient Rome Revisited. If you've just clicked subscribe, then I, Marcus Aurelius, thank you. If you like this video, then you must watch A Day in the Life of a Roman Legionnaire. You'll love it, I promise. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.